Where can climate communicators find these sources, whether in media, government, non-governmental organization, education, or business, where they can find ready-to-use visuals, images, data to reach their audiences. I'm happy to introduce today's speaker, Karen Florini, Vice President of the Strategic Impact at Climate Central. Karen Florini is joining us as one of the applicants to the CMCC award with the Climate Central's project Climate Matters, which is a short bulletin with highly localized graphics that they send out every week to journalists and climate communicators to help them building their stories and to bring their stories closer to people. So Climate Central is an independent and not-for-profit group made of scientists, researchers, and communicators who report the facts about climate change and highlight the effect that it has on people's lives. So they collaborate with TV meteorologists, journalists, and communication professionals. Welcome, Karen. Karen should be connected online from the USA.
Thanks so much for inviting me to join you today from across the Atlantic Ocean. In the next few minutes, I'm going to give you an overview of Climate Matters and a couple of other of our free tools that you can use in communicating about climate change impacts and solutions in your community to your audiences and stakeholders. Just a quick word about Climate Central. As was mentioned, we're a nonprofit climate science and research organization. Unlike most civil society organizations working on climate, we're not an advocacy group. We never take positions on particular policies or technologies. Sometimes we report on them, but reporting on, for example, solar power is not advocating for solar power any more than when we report on hurricanes, we're certainly not advocating for hurricanes. We're essentially business to business in that we don't aim to send materials directly out to the public. Instead, we are helping create tools that help climate communicators in a variety of contexts in media and elsewhere reach their audiences and stakeholders with these free materials. We do this to help build the durable public will to respond to climate change at the scale and for duration that's necessary. So we do this on a continuing basis with new fact-based content every day and every week. Studies have shown that you have to keep continually reinforcing the connections between climate science, climate impacts, and climate solutions over and over again. Partly that's to help immunize people against the kind of disinformation we were just hearing about, but also just because in the course of daily life, things that people aren't reminded about recede to the back of their mind. So today I'm going to mostly focus on Climate Matters. I'll also talk about our Climate Shift Index and make a very brief mention of one other tool at the end. So each week, the Climate Matters team sends production-ready graphics to media professionals and other climate communicators. The graphics are ready for use on the air, in print digital form, and on social media. All of these materials are produced simultaneously in Spanish as well as in English. We launched Climate Matters in 2012, focusing initially on local TV meteorologists because of data that showed they were important as trusted messengers on climate. That was true in 2012, and it continues to be true in 2023. A few years ago, we expanded to include all beats and all media. So regardless of whether it's meteorology or economics or what have you, it's all beats across all kinds of media. The network continues to grow. We've got nearly half of the TV meteorologists in the US participating, as well as 1,600 other journalists and many hundreds of other people as well. The program's very well regarded, as indicated by this quote from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA is the US's lead agency on weather and climate data. And multiple studies in the peer-reviewed literature show that this kind of communication really does impact people's views and understanding and level of concern about climate change. So each week, what we're sending out is something that's got about impacts or solutions with the graphics and analysis that backs it up. Usually it's key to current happenings. For example, in July in the Northern Hemisphere, we're usually talking about heat in any number of ways. We cover not just the weather, but also its consequences, such as air pollution and urban heat islands, disease-carrying icky bugs, and worse, allergies with longer allergy season. In addition to local data graphics, the weekly bulletin generally has a national overview graphic and an explainer, as well as short bullets of key concepts with links. To help reporters, we also list experts, and there is always a methodology section. When we've got more to say on a particular topic than will fit into one of those really short weekly bulletins, we'll release an accompanying report, usually around 10 pages, like this one on allergies. We also have graphics that show the basics, like the fundamental relationship between temperature and carbon dioxide, and more detailed ones, such as this one showing the relationship between temperature and El Nino, which is the naturally occurring set of climate patterns that are influenced heavily by the tropical Pacific Ocean temperatures. My personal favorite is our moving bell curve. It shows how a very small change in average temperatures has a huge impact on extremes. And of course, it's the extremes that have the biggest real world impacts. We also find other kinds of ways to visualize climate change. Every year, for example, we help publicize International Warming Stripes Day, or climate stripes, as it's sometimes called. That's on the first day of summer, the summer solstice. This graphic wasn't created by us, but rather by Dr. Ed Hawkins at the University of Reading. Each stripe is the global average temperature for a year from 1850 to now. It's an attractive graphic. We actually make lots of small lapel buttons that are great ways to start conversations because people think it's a work of art. They will ask, is this a Mondrian? And you can say, no, this is global average temperature from 1850 to the present. Sometimes we also tie this into popular culture. For example, last year when the Barbie movie came out, we did a special version in her Barbie colors for her home state of California since the doll's creation in 1959. More and more, though, we're focusing on solutions, including on topics that people who might not care much about climate change still resonate with. So we look at healthcare costs, home energy costs, and clean energy jobs. As with our climate information, our climate solutions work has a local focus. For example, for last Earth Day, we created solution summaries for each of the 50 US states, each with its own background photo that would be recognized by people in that state as something that's particular to their state and that they have pride in. All of these resources can be found through the resources tab of our website, which is searchable by keyword and by US location. Though Climate Matters is mostly focused on the US, we do have some global elements as well, of course, looking at global average temperature, for example. So we invite and encourage you to sign up to receive Climate Matters bulletins through this form on our website, which this QR code will take you to. Speaking of solutions, our weather power tool compiles information on installed capacity of wind and solar for all US locations, then combines that with data on current weather and crunches the numbers to show the amount of electricity generated by US state, county, media market, or congressional district. And because most folks don't think in terms of megawatt hours, we also provide a variety of equivalencies. So when you go to the weather power site, you can pick from these different kinds of equivalencies and rankings. The other tool I'll focus on briefly is the Climate Shift Index. It quantifies the fingerprint of climate change on temperature everywhere, every day. It goes beyond the statistics on global average temperatures to connect climate to real life experience in the here and now all over the world. We use a peer-reviewed methodology, and the index lets us answer the question, how much more likely is this temperature at this time of year because of climate change? The map's default setting is average daily temperature, but the advanced setting lets you look at the daily highs and lows. These are what often matter even more than the average, because the daily low, for example, overnight low, if that's an unusually warm temperature, that's going to interfere with people's ability to get sleep unless they have the ability to afford to run an air conditioner all night. And the daily highs, of course, are what have the biggest impact when you're out of doors. Some of the most interesting applications of the index are when it's used to connect climate change to events that are salient locally. So a meteorologist cited the index when commenting on the cancellation of a marathon due to extreme heat in the Twin Cities. Twin Cities is a nickname for Minneapolis, St. Paul. For those not familiar with US geography, it's pretty far north. And this was on October 1st, which is well into autumn. So it was a truly bizarre time to have a heat wave in Minneapolis. And the climate shift index allowed us to say that those temperatures at that time of year in that location were 2 to 3 times more likely as a result of climate change. The shift index can be used not only to see current conditions, but also used for retrospective analysis. So last week, we released one retrospective covering the hottest 12-month stretch in recorded history, namely the 12 months that just preceded us. Note that we released this study just 9 days after the study period ended at the end of October. So one of the great things about the index is that it is very, very able to provide real-time information. The report drew a lot of media attention in the US and elsewhere around the globe. And as with the Climate Matters program, we put a big emphasis on having extensive local information. So the new report, we provide data by continent, by city, and by country. That provides opportunities for coverage at various geographic levels. If you're interested in the underlying data, you can find this link at the bottom of the first page of the report and download the whole data set yourself. In addition to retrospectives, beginning this summer, we also periodically issued alerts when the index identified particularly notable results for current and very near-term weather in the next couple of days. And we expect to be expanding that to additional geographies going forward. You can receive these alerts by signing up here at the bottom of the index homepage. The form prompts you with some suggestions based on your location, but you're not limited to that. For example, if you're interested in Florence, start typing in Florence, and it will prompt you with Florence locations in Italy, and it turns out there's some in the United States as well. Click on the one you want, and it'll be added to your list. Delete the ones that you don't want, and that's all there is to it. Everything I've mentioned is free and available for reuse for any non-commercial purpose, including education, and for commercial news purposes. You just need to credit us. You don't need specific permission. We give it blanket. And I'll close with one quick mention of an additional tool from our program on sea level rise. Our interactive global map on coastal flood risk lets you look by year, water level, and more. It's a zoomable Google map that covers all known polar locations worldwide. And we have science-based visuals showing the consequences of long-term sea level rise, depending on how hot we allow the climate to get in the near term. This image of Naples shows some flooding after 1.5 degrees of warming, and a lot more if warming goes up to 3 degrees. So that's a quick overview of some of Climate Central's free tools for storytellers. We welcome you to use these in making climate change local and making it real. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you for your presentation. I just want to ask you if you have anything among your tools, instruments, and suggestions for schools, for education, to suggest to the world of academia to transmit to students climate change concepts.
Thanks. That's a great question. Well, of course, anything that we have available, people are welcome to use in doing their own teaching about climate change, such as some of the overall basic concept examples that I gave. But also, I've worked with some educators who have assigned students to do reports for their local community or their hometown, pulling information together and saying, these are some of the most significant potential impacts for our community. Here are some of the trends that have been affecting us already. Here are some of the projections for the future. And here are some of the solutions that are going to be relevant in our community as well. So there's a wide variety of things that are available for use, and we strongly encourage everybody to go ahead and use them. That's what they're there for.
Great. Thank you, Karen. Thank you from our public in Florence.